In the dead of night, when the moon is high and ill winds blow, and the banshees cry and the moonlight casts an unearthly glow, arise, my love, with tales of woe.
Good evening. It is 12 midnight, the paranormal hour. Welcome to Ghost to Ghost. I'm your host, Chief Lawson. Ghost to Ghost is a podcast to discuss all paranormal and parapsychology subjects. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats, so tell your friends, tell your family. Come listen to Ghost to Ghost. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the midnight hour. It is time for Ghost to Ghost. As we trudge along in our new year of 2025, our new subject matter tonight is the Whaley House in San Diego, California. Tonight's co-hosts that are with me is Jennifer Verne, our research manager and podcast producer.
Good evening.
Heather Lawson, our case manager and podcast director.
Hello.
Eric Kerr, our research assistant and our podcast co-producer.
Hello, everyone.
And with us, but not on mic, is Mia Kerr, our social media and public relations manager. She's waving. There you go. All right. So I'm going to let Jennifer start us out. She did the research here, and then we'll kind of go from there, as we usually do.
Okay. The Whaley House is Old Town, San Diego, California. It's a Greek Revival-style residence, and it's currently now a museum. Built by Thomas Whaley. So let's get the Whaley family just a little bit. Thomas Whaley is married to Anna Whaley, and they had 6 kids. Francis, Thomas Jr., Anna, George, Violet, and Corinne. Thomas Jr. did not last long. He died 18 months old from scarlet fever in 1858, just 5 months after the family has moved into this newly built home, which is actually also the first general store in Old Town San Diego. Thomas Whaley had actually moved to San Diego from San Francisco, where he had been part owner of a general store with a man named George Wardell, which is why he named his other son George. Mm-hmm. This business had actually burned down, and at that point Thomas decided to venture out on his own, and he moved to Southern California to start there. The land he chose to build came at possibly a rather good price, because Whaley knows that it's actually the site of the former town gallows and execution yard.
You know, you always got to ask yourself, if it's that cheap, there's usually a reason
There's
for
usually
that.
a reason for it. And, of course, he knew what it was used for, because he was actually present and participated in some of these events.
There you go.
He was actually a member of a firing squad that executed Antonio Gara and Juan Verduga in 1852, along with 12 other men were part of the firing squad. And Thomas Whaley was one of those men.
Wow.
He was also present at the hanging of the infamous Yankee Jim Robinson. So anybody who knows the story of the Whaley House even a little bit is going to know
they never mentioned
Yankee
Jim's
Jim.
dog. He actually had a dog.
He had a dog?
Yeah, there's only a few accounts that do that. We'll talk about that in a few.
Well, I know
he
about,
actually had a dog. Yeah.
I know about dogs, but I know about the Whaley's dogs, not Jim's dog.
Yeah, Jim actually had a dog. It's a long story, but we'll go ahead.
Well, Jim
they did
Robinson.
That man so wrong.
They did. They did. Well, he was a town drunk, town thief, town nuisance, right? And he stole a boat in order to steal a bigger boat. And the 3 guys got caught. The 2 guys with him got 1-year prison sentences. And Jim got death. Because the town was done with him, over and done with.
He did testify he just wanted to borrow the bigger boat. He wasn't going to steal it.
He was just going to borrow it. Yeah.
It was a schooner, but
there was some loophole, if I remember correctly, Chief, about he had just crossed the line just enough in order to qualify for the death penalty.
Yes, and it had to
because
do
of
with
the possession of.
Well, it started with the fact that he took this rowboat. Okay, now the real story behind the rowboat was it was used to go across the river source there, and it was used by anybody who wanted it. I mean, it was owned by a couple people, but people would get in it, roll across, and then whoever was on that side would bring it back when they crossed, and that's how it kind of worked out. Well, the problem was actually there was actually 3 Robinsons, if you want to get right down to it. There was actually 2 that were thieves and crooks, and this one really got blamed for some stuff he didn't do. But they got him for the initial stealing the rowboat. And they asked him why and where he was going. He says, I'm rolling out to the schooner, and I forgot the schooner's name.
The Poultice?
Poultice, yeah. It was a real odd name, Poultice. And
I think it was Pultus.
Yeah, he's rolling out there. And for the sole purpose of, and I have temporarily lost my notes for 5 minutes. Anyway, but he's rolling out there for this thing. And during the process, he gets caught, but he gets to the point that he's almost to the poultice when they yell. Well, when they yelled at him from the shore, they said, stop and turn around and come back. Well, he did. He rolled back. And, he could have kept going. He could have got on the poultice because the waterways in the United States even then were considered to be neutral territory. They weren't necessarily owned by the state. So many feet out from the bank is considered part of the state or part of that territory, but the generally open current wouldn't have been. He rolls back, and so before this, though, they've been looking for this guy in another territory, but it wasn't this guy; it was another Robinson, and he also went by the name of Yankee Jim. Go ahead. Oh, I thought you were okay. Me and her were just talking about this. So this poor guy, they
had the same middle initial too, didn't they?
Nope, they had the same last name. The initial was different in the middle, but neither one of them had a W in the middle. If you look at his tombstone, it says W. Robinson. That was the name of the prosecutor in his case. They got confused and they put it on his Jim. And this poor bastard, he went through
no wonder
a rough
Jim
life.
has got problems.
Oh yeah, so they look at it and they say, well, he was attempting to board the other vessel. Both of those together makes it grand larceny.
Right.
If he just stole the rowboat, it wouldn't have been a grand larceny. It would have been a minor larceny, and he'd have probably got some prison time.
So was there anything else that happened? Did he do anything else? Or
That's the funny thing. You see, they accused him of a bunch of things because this other Robinson had stolen some horses, but actually this Robinson had too. When they went to go find him, they found a corral with a few guys' horses in it. So, and as these people were looking, they're going, "Wait a minute, that's my horse," and that's not looking good for Jim. Him and his dog, and they actually were prospectors. That's what he did. Well, there was another prospector didn't like him, and he started a bad issue about the fact that this guy was killing people and robbing them of their gold. It wasn't him, it was another Robinson. But all that carried over. So the city of San Diego says, we need to make an example out of this guy.
So Yankee Jim got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, and of course the prosecutor, his name is W. Robinson. Oh. And not only that, he's related to the judge. Now the judge is, go ahead.
Go ahead.
If you didn't know this, the judge is a borderline alcoholic. And so he actually, in the courtroom, in the general store outside, he opens a liquor wall and writes his own liquor license, so he can sell his own liquor off the wall out there when he's not
to himself.
So he's a politician, basically.
Exactly, he's a politician. Oh my God, he's one of the first red politicians you ever get. And oh my God, so poor Jim was just, there was nothing he could do. And he actually thought this guy was like me. He was a talker. He thought he'd talk his way out of it. He could convince everybody how good he was. Now, he was no angel. He really wasn't. He
was a criminal, but
he just didn't do that.
He didn't do enough to deserve being hung. And
what's even worse than that, the guy's tall. Okay?
Yeah, very, very tall.
He's French-Canadian.
He's 6'1".
And I can't remember what the dog's name was. I was trying to remember.
At this point in time, they were still doing the long drops.
Yes, they were.
And so instead of dropping and breaking his neck and all that, he hung for 45 minutes, strangling.
What they do, they put him on the back of a wagon. Yeah, and they'd have a mule pull it. And actually, he was hung twice. The first time, he came down and landed on his feet. And they had to start over again. Yeah. They had to make the rope shorter because they never realized how tall he was.
They actually drug his feet off the wagon at that point.
It was built for shorter people.
And he was standing there, and he looked over, and he says, am I officially hung now? And they don't tell that in history, and they go back and they go, not yet. And they bring the wagon back, and they shorten the rope, and the second time he does, his toes can touch, but for 15 minutes, well, I think it's 45 minutes.
45.
Yeah, 45 minutes.
45.
He strangles to death.
Yeah.
Now, it gets better. Because he was so tall, the coffin they made for him was too short, so they cut his legs off to make him fit into the casket before they buried him.
the head.
Well, most people would have thought that. But yeah, they actually, now, some accounts say they broke them. It was a
pre-made coffin.
Yeah, I was saying if you could break them, then...
Yeah, and some say they were cut off. Either way, he was made to fit the coffin. So this poor bastard, he's not a saint, but certainly didn't deserve the death penalty. And
or the legs.
And then so they pack him in the coffin. They bury him in El Padre Cemetery. And the thing about that is, when they buried him, they did the tombstone ahead of time, and the guy that was the undertaker got confused, and the paper gave the name of James W. Robinson, which was the guy that was the prosecutor, so he's buried under a tombstone that's not even accurate.
Oh, man.
And no one knows what happened to the dog. They were going to try to trial and hang the dog. They never talk about that. But they were going to hang the dog, and someone said, you can't hang a damn dog. And so they turned the dog loose. We don't know what happened to the dog, but he had a dog that stayed with him. They don't say what kind of dog. It just, So when his ghost first started appearing, people would see him in the cemetery with a dog. And they didn't know why, and it was his dog.
Wow.
But this guy was kind of roused about, he lived where he could, and the original story that was associated with the other Robinson was that at one point he had found a fairly good gold claim. He was bringing gold in, and one day someone stumbled upon him, and this other guy, and he says, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you about my gold mine. He told him. So then he pulls out a pistol, and this guy goes, oh my God, I'm going to die here. Well, it turns out the guy doesn't have any bullets for it. So he says, look, if you go into town and buy me some bullets for this gun and come back by yourself, I'll take you to the gold mine. Well, Neil said the guy wasn't that dumb. So he left and came back to the town and said, hey, I know where this Yankee Jim is at. Well, this was a different guy. He'd already took off out of there after he got rid of the guy, figuring he wouldn't come back. So, and this guy ended up actually going several areas over into somewhere in, I think, Nevada's where he ending up in his demise. But I mean, this poor bastard that got it, he was a horse thief, that was true, but really, he wasn't really stealing the rowboat. Everybody
and he wasn't that, he was a low-level criminal.
I'm just glad that we don't have that type of justice here. Indianapolis would be completely abandoned.
Oh God, yeah. I tell you, I kind of.
But that land was contested over and fought over. The Varduga, the Gara gang before that.
Yes,
that was really intense. It was 1851, and that was over taxes, and it was a whole big gunfight and everything else.
Remember, but that was one of the last areas to be seceded from the Mexican government.
Right.
And and I'll tell you, when I got to go through there, and it's many, many, many years ago. I can't remember how long ago it's been, but it was back in, I'm going to say the late 90s. I was out there. And I'm sure the tours improved a lot. But when I was out there, one thing I'll tell you is they, when they went through, they'd tell you all about the ghosts. And of course, they don't tell you about the mix-up with Yankee Jim. I think some of that really came in light in the early 2000s when they started researching it. There's several people who have made some pretty good books on it. But oddly enough, when you get looking at it, all the paranormal groups that went out there, which is strange, one of the more famous groups, TAPS, has never been there.
I know. I kept looking. I kept thinking.
No, they've never been there.
I'm sure that I have seen Grant inside that theater room, but no, I can't find anything. I can't find anything.
No.
But
now, Ghost Adventures have been there. God help us.
Multiple times. But so that land has always had issues.
Oh, yeah.
Always had conflict and skirmishes, and things didn't go Thomas's way.
No.
He built the house in 1857.
Yeah.
His son dies in 1858, and later that same year, an arson fire burns down his house and his store.
Oh yeah.
And Anna's like, "No, we're done. We're leaving." So the Whaleys move back to San Francisco, and Anna and the family stay there. Thomas actually goes all the way up to Alaska, and he works in Alaska for a while. And then eventually, as things turn around, they come back 10 years later in 1868. And Thomas partners up with a man named Philip Crosswaith. Mm-hmm. And they opened the Whaley Crosswaith General Store. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that is in the same spot.
Yeah, it's in the same building.
Same spot. Yeah, they restore and rebuild and everything else. So the store is on the first floor, and the housing is upstairs on the second floor. As the only thing else is a living room on the first floor.
Yeah. If you go in the main door, you go to the left, it's the general store. You go to the right, it's their living room.
Right. So another way to make money is, in addition, he rents out rooms in the top floor to the Thomas Tanner Theater Group.
Yep.
So he decides he wants to be the big shot in town. He's got the biggest, nicest house.
Yep.
So he's going to open up a theater.
Yeah, it used to be his ballroom, and he turns it into a full theater.
A little theater.
Yep.
And then it's only open briefly because 17 days after opening night, Thomas Tanner actually dies backstage.
Yeah.
So Thomas Tanner dies in the house.
And there was a lot of back and forth of whether or not that was natural death or
Right.
not.
Well,
Right.
it most likely was. He had TB.
Yeah, he had consumption or TB.
Yeah.
And so more than likely that's what. But, the bad thing was back then, there was actually a lot of death involved in theatrical performances because of jealousy or whatnot.
Yeah.
It wasn't uncommon. But,
Yeah.
I think you're probably right. This guy probably had,
Right.
to the point you could go no further.
Yeah. So then after the theater is now defunct,
Yeah.
Thomas rents out the upper floor to the city county board so they can hold their meetings.
Yeah.
And then he rents out the first floor granary addition that they had added on, and that becomes the first courthouse for San
Yes.
Diego. Okay. But this doesn't last long. Old Town is now struggling with Newtown.
Yep.
And by 1970, all business has moved into Newtown.
Yep.
And all the courthouse furniture and records have been ordered to be moved, but Thomas and the Old Town residents refused. Thomas had a lease with the city to lease out that space, and they weren't paying him. So Thomas was like, "You're not getting it until I get my money." Well, Thomas goes away on business one night, and the Newtowners come in, and they take all the records, and according to legend, they hold his wife, Anna Whaley, at gunpoint on the 9th step of the staircase as they're doing this. And Thomas never did see the back due money on the lease.
Wow.
Yeah. Then we come to 1882. Two of the Whaley daughters are married. That's Anna and Violet.
Violet, yeah.
Violet's is not going to end well. And again, anybody who's familiar with Whaley House knows that Violet is the other spirit said to be there at the house. And the reason it didn't go well is she marries a guy named George Bertolacci.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And just shortly after they're married, she finds out in a letter that he has written that he's got a very sordid past and he's actually a con man. And he only married her in hopes of inheriting some of the Whaley fortune.
Well, sure.
Yeah. So,
If you're going to go big, go
Which
big.
happened more often than you would think.
all the time.
Nowadays.
Yeah.
That
All
happened
the
a lot back
time.
then.
Yeah. But she wasn't going to take it, and she went back to live with her parents and ended up in divorce, which of course was catastrophically a big social no-no.
Yep.
Right. The youngest daughter, Corinne, was actually engaged to be married at that time, but the fiance broke the engagement off because of the scandal.
Yes.
And Corinne actually never even married at that point, ever.
Wow.
So Anna can't take it, or Violet can't take it. And in 1885, she had tried a couple of times to kill herself.
Yeah.
She had tried to throw herself down the cistern and had been stopped. And it was so much so that she was actually secluding herself and locking herself away in her room. And then the family would never let her out of their sight. There was always somebody who was watching her.
There's a story I read that when she was in the cistern, they lowered a rope down. She refused to get on it, and they had to actually put a ladder, and somebody had to go down and get her and bring her out.
Yeah.
She was refusing to leave the cistern.
Yeah, she was really despondent, really, really despondent. And so one day she did happen to get away and take her father's pistol and killed herself in the outhouse, shot herself in the chest. Thomas heard the noise, knew immediately what was going on, went and got her. She was still alive, but he carried her into the house and laid her on the couch there, and that's where she passed away in the house.
Well, on the tour, they had the actual firearm that she used.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
This is like a .40 caliber. This is not a small weapon.
Yeah.
It's going to leave a hole.
Wow.
Yeah.
No
Wow.
wonder she lasted long enough to go back to the
Oh, yeah,
Exactly.
it is a wonder. It is a wonder. But at this point, Thomas and Anna were like, all right, done again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
And he moved the family out, and he actually moved into Newtown. And they were done with Old Town. It wasn't until 1909 that the oldest, Francis Whaley, he moves back into the old house in Old Town and restores the house and opens it as a tourist historical site. And he also plays the guitar to bring in extra money and tourists and whatever. Now, At that point, several of the members then moved back to the Whaley House and end up passing away in the Whaley House. So in 1913, Anna dies. She's 80 years old at this point, so the matron, Miss Whaley. And then a year later, Frances dies in 1914. George dies in 1928. And then Corinne Whaley, who had never married, was a spinster. She stayed in the house until her death in 1953.
She made it the longest.
Yeah, she was the youngest, so she made it the longest. Yep.
Yep.
So that's the history.
Yep.
Now we're going to go on to the haunts. General claims were ghostly figures walking in the garden. A woman is seen in the upstairs window. Male figures are seen. There's one man that is seen at the top of the stairs in a top hat. And throughout the house, this man is seen opening and closing windows and whatnot. The interesting thing that I'm going to bring in here real quick is these things did not start happening after the Whaleys had died. These things were already happening when the Whaleys were living.
Yeah, the Whaleys themselves reported haunting.
The Whaleys themselves reported haunting, and Anna thought that it was Yankee Jim. Anna was sure it was Yankee Jim. She would hear footsteps on the stairs. They would see muddy footprints when there weren't supposed to be many footprints.
Yeah, exactly.
And nobody really knows exactly where the gallows were, but it is supposed that it's either on the stairs or in the archway area of the parlor room.
And that's the archway that shares the ground, supposedly.
Yes.
That the gallows were on.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not positive, but it's one of those two places they suspect.
Yeah.
Right. In addition to all this, there's strange mists, light orbs are seen and photographed. There was actually one really cool photograph taken in the courtroom.
I've seen that one.
Right?
Yeah.
And it looks like a ghostly apparition.
Yeah.
But the old episode of Fact or Faked, you remember the Ben
Oh, yeah.
Hansen's
Yep.
old show
Yep.
back from the
Yep.
mid-2000s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
They actually went and they were actually able to recreate that and debunk that photo as a light reflection from the windows.
Yeah.
So that was a really good episode.
I was trying to see. I recorded when that was, but I don't have the date. It was prior to 2007 when they done it.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because oddly enough, I got some information. Not only did they Fact or Faked went there, then actually it was mentioned in Hellboy, Blood and Iron, the animated series. They mentioned the Whaley House. 2012, Asylum is filmed partially there, the movie. I've never seen that, but 2012 also featured biographies channel as The Haunting of Regis Philbin. And Regis Philbin.
Regis Philbin's story. This is a good one.
This is. It actually is a good one. I don't have a lot of information on it. I have actually never seen it, but they have a framed picture of it. When I was there at the time, they had a framed picture of the one, not of Regis Philbin, but of the Sci-Fi channel up there. Because I think that was about the time. I think that was still maybe in the 90s. I think I remember seeing that there. Now, Philbin hadn't been there when I was there. I was there very early on. They had another TV.
Regis Philbin's encounter was in 66.
Yeah, but they didn't film it till later.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I didn't get it. There was another group that was on the wall, but I can't remember. It obviously didn't make the news that big. And then, of course, Ghost Adventures were there in 2014, 2017, and I don't remember. They were there several times. Supernatural was there for a little while in 17, and then Ghost Files there in 22. Actually, BuzzFeed has an interesting one. If you never watch these guys, they're screwy enough. They're fun to watch.
That wasn't a bad episode.
No, it's a combination podcast field trip. I mean, that's all you can say for it. Two guys, they're fun to watch, and it's called BuzzFeed. I watched them on a couple of things, but they're mainly West Coast people. But they do a few, and it's when you look at how many people have been in and out of that house, and one thing I found out is, believe it or not, that is the only location the Department of Commerce of the United States lists as an authentic haunted house. That's why they hold the title as the most haunted house in America.
That's
because
interesting.
the U.S. Department of Commerce says it's haunted. The government recognizes it as haunted. So
they can tax it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
That's fair.
Yeah, got to
think
get
about
those
that.
taxes
Yeah.
in. So,
Well, there are so many different accounts and so many different spirits listed that it's always hard when I don't hate it, but I really dislike it when they say, well, Violet Whaley stays, in the upstairs corridor. She's mostly seen upstairs.
Oh, we had the same thing with the Hannah house. They said, this one stays there.
This
and
one
this
stays here,
there. Yeah,
and Yankee Jim is on the stairs
We know
and
for a fact
stomping.
that spirits don't stay.
They don't
in a house.
stay.
No.
And they don't stay in one room of the house either.
No.
They don't always
So
stay in a house or
how
a
can
room
you
or
attribute
anywhere.
a specific action to a specific spirit? You don't really know that.
No.
And there's a child's laughter that they hear in the kitchen. And so they're trying to figure out why a child would be laughing in the kitchen. So this story has developed of this.
Kids laugh anywhere. Trust me.
Right?
I have
Is that the one
grandchildren.
about
Yeah.
that ate the poison?
Well, okay, so there's a story about ate the poison, but the other story about her is she was the neighbor girl, Anna or Isabel. We don't really know.
Yeah, and they never did prove either the girl existed.
No,
did they?
we can't even
No.
prove it. But
Yeah.
not only is there a
Supposedly got
poison
hold
story.
Of, what was it? It's not cyanide. It's cyanide smells like almond. This one tastes like fruit.
Starts with an A.
Arsenic.
Well,
yeah.
see, I couldn't even find that one.
Yeah.
The one I kept finding was the
It was
clothesline
Kellogg's.
story.
Oh yeah,
Paste.
yeah. I
Where-
saw the clothesline story.
Where she was playing outside and they were running in to get a
Yeah.
treat or whatever.
But none of
and
that is-
She broke her neck on the
Neck,
clothesline
yeah.
and then died in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's a tall kid. You ever see a clothesline? People
Yeah.
don't put those down because they don't want their clothes dragging the floor. I mean, or the ground.
Yeah.
My parents
that's
had
another
them. A
thing
lot
I
of
didn't
people.
think about, but
My
Yeah.
grandparents had.
Well, a lot of younger people
Yeah.
don't realize they've not been around clotheslines. It's not you don't see a lot of people doing it nowadays. But my mom and my grandmother did. She
My
put her
grandmother did, too.
and oh my God, she'd go ape when she found out you were out there. Because kids, it was the greatest thing in the world. You weave in between it. They'd have like 6 lines. It was like a labyrinth until you got caught.
yeah, I mean, you would run through the clothesline.
Yeah.
So, I don't
And
know.
you run through the clothing. It was great until your grandmother caught
Right.
you.
Don't
Yeah.
But, I
touch
mean,
the laundry.
Again,
yeah.
in my opinion, you don't need to have a death in order to have a haunt. So
Do you know there's actually a song dedicated to it's a ballad of Yankee Jim. I could not get it because I was going to try to put it on here. I couldn't find it anywhere, but it's actually a ballad, and I didn't download all of it, but basically it talks about him stealing the boat, but it was a folk song that was actually developed right before the turn of the century. So, I mean, it was early on. It was done on a harpsichord, which is like an accordion, or not accordion. It's like a
no, it's like a little piano-y type.
yeah, it's and I can't think of. I thought of the string harp on the lap, but I think you're right. It's more like a piano type.
Yeah.
like type that has
It's
keys.
a small tingy type
Yeah.
piano. Think a Handel.
Oh yeah,
Composer Handel composed on
that'll work,
harpsichord.
yeah. But it just it was funny and when you read back through the transcript of the trial, and I actually have part of that, it gets even more interesting as you go. I mean, I could see where people could do a lot with books on this because this poor guy, I mean, basically he was made an example out of, and that was the grandest of it all, and it was sad. But now, oddly enough, and I don't endorse ghost adventurers, but anyway. I hate to say the name loud. But anyway, one of the times they were there, I believe it was them, they talked about the ghost. And actually, it's the cemetery is not El Padre, it's Compadre.
No, El Campo?
Campo.
El
I'm
Campo.
sorry, I'm saying it wrong. Campo.
That's where Gara and Verdugo are buried.
When I was there, it was a 2-part tour. You went through the house, and they showed you the build on where you went in the courtroom and you sat. You went in the theater and sat. They showed you where the gallows thought they were at, and the actual room that the young boy died in of scarlet fever. It's roped off.
Yep.
There's a plaque there.
Yep.
There was 2 tours. The one you paid to get in the building to wander around on your own. Then you got to go with a guide. Either one was about the same amount. But either way, I took the one with the guide, and then it ended. You went down to the cemetery. And the guide that we had, now we watched one on YouTube, and I wish I had this guide. He was a lot of fun. He told me, he says, we won't jump out of corners and stuff to scare you. It's not a theatrical haunted house, he says, but it does have ghosts. So throughout the way, he'd either slam a piano door or something, the whole group would scream. He goes, well, now that one's one that we will do. But he was a really good guide, and we watched him on YouTube go through. And I remembered some of it they didn't, that guy brought out the other, my guy didn't. But it ended at El Capo Cemetery, and they took it down. And this cemetery, now Old Town, thing to understand about Old Town San Diego, it's like Conner Prairie is around here. No cars, and actually it had all kinds of rules. They had bicycles when I was there, but you could go down, you go through the different areas. Now, the where the Whaley House is at, behind that's where one of the parking lots is at.
Right.
And you have all the cars back there, but you're not allowed to drive in Old Town. And you walk, and it's neat, and it has a lot of different buildings that are reportedly haunted, including the hotel and stuff. And, but when you took the tour there, the cemetery is part of it. You took the night tour, which we took an evening tour. They go down, they would tell you about all these graves. And there were several people actually executed the same time that Yankee Jim was, same day, everything was after him. And one of the Ghost Adventures, I'm pretty sure it was one of their episodes, they believed that the ghost they were picking up on was these other two. And actually one of them was found out later that he was innocent, but they hung him anyway.
Wow.
And I can't remember his name, and if you give me a second here, I'll look back through my notes really fast. But there was one guy in particular that was very upset the fact that he had been wronged, and he was executed. And then there was another guy who died there. Now, he wasn't part of the third one. I don't know. I don't have any information on him. But the other gentleman who died there wasn't executed, but he died in a very heinous way, and they buried him on the same day they buried Jim. And what happened was he was eaten by wolves and coyotes, and it's a bad situation. Hang on a minute,
You should see Jennifer's face right now.
Oh
when
yeah,
he said that.
this poor bastard. I mean,
oh my
I mean, you look at
gosh.
some of these people. No wonder they're unhappy. Don't want to stay in the damn cemetery. I mean, the way they went out was not exactly grandiose. And I mean it. Okay, here it is. Okay, let's see here. And actually some of the graves are actually part of the sidewalk because they screwed up and didn't know they were there. These have Mexicans, Americans from the war. They have, I mean, this is a very old cemetery.
Which would explain why so many different types of ghosts are seen.
Exactly.
Especially in the courtroom.
And they have plaques telling you that on the cemetery you're walking, below that is this grave and this grave because they're all in there. So anyway, when they do the tour, this guy comes out in period clothing. Now, I'll never forget when we were on the tour, the guy that was, the one we saw on YouTube was a younger guy. These guys were older guys. One guy come out and says, he introduced this other tour guide. He said, I want you all to know he is not a ghost. He says, this is actually one of our guides in tour, in period dress. And he walks off after he gets out of the room. He says, but he moves slower than snot. And everyone thinks he's a ghost because he doesn't move that fast. And, oh my God. But they took you down the cemetery, and this guy came out. And his name, he was actually named as the most, and again, it was all falsified. Wrightington was his name. And, he was known as the wickedest man in California, and it turned out he wasn't. But he actually was executed, and they found out that he was innocent. So he is actually buried two graves over from Yankee Jim. And then, let's see here. The other gentleman, I don't have his name down here, but he was actually eaten by wolves, and they didn't find his body in time, and he was partially consumed, and they buried him there. And I don't see his name. Give me 2 seconds here.
How does getting eaten by wolves end up getting you lumped in with a bunch of criminals?
Well, yeah. I mean, that make one wonder, wouldn't it? What happened was he passed out drunk. And when he passed out drunk, the coyotes ate him.
Okay.
And but anyway.
Back then, I guess drunkenness was
now,
just
the
as
other
worth
thing
as
that I
criminal
found
activity.
out. Well, yeah, that was considered bad. I mean, back in being a Freemason, I can tell you, back in the day, part of the grand charges of the Blue Law was that if you were a drunken soul and you were drunken too much. Obviously, the shrine wasn't around back then. But anyway, that's just all part of it. But I'll tell you. One thing I did find out while I was researching this, when the day they hung Yankee Jim, when they captured this guy, and Tibbetts was the guy that turned him in, was the name of the guy that turned him in. There's a conflicting story to whether he was hit over the head with a shovel or a cavalry sword. Either way, it was a pretty lunky
I heard
thing.
rusted sword.
Yeah. He had a head injury. He was running a fever. With a severe head injury, and he was half delirious when they supposedly hung him.
Right.
So this poor bastard really did go out in the roughest way you possibly could.
Yeah,
if I was going to haunt anybody or have a reason to, he's got it. He probably, him and the guy who got ate by the coyotes, they all probably have a good reason to be there. But in this Ghost Adventures episode, they go back, and the spirit box, they go to the graveyard and spend quite a bit of time there, and they come to the conclusion that these other two are what's haunting and not Yankee Jim.
Well, I think there's a lot because almost everybody who works at the Whaley House has had a story.
Oh God, yeah.
You know,
Including the Whaleys.
they're all there, and police officers. I've
Yes.
got two
I forgot about
stories
that,
here.
yeah.
I've got two stories here. The first one was this man was dispatched to the 2400 block of San Diego Avenue in response to a 911 call. And the concerned citizen had reported that a woman was crying outside the historic Whaley Museum. The responding police officer will never forget the eerie evening nearly 30 years ago. It was the night he saw a ghost and something he didn't talk about for decades. He actually only wrote about this in his retirement letter.
Yes.
He retired and then gave a confidential letter that's now no longer confidential. The officer had come onto the property. He believed he was by himself. And there was a woman at the back of the house crying.
Yeah.
And the museum manager recounted this confidential letter. And in the letter, he said that she was in period clothing. And he asked, "Ma'am, are you all right?" She turned around and smiled. But according to Santana's recollection, the officer shone his flashlight on her and the woman then vanished.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you go out on a 911 call and the person you're then trying to help vanishes, that's something you don't forget.
No, there's
Especially right in front of your eyes.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel, and it has 911 calls that police and fire respond to. Now, I've never responded to one like that, but I'll tell you what, one of the best calls I ever saw was on this channel, and these officers were responding to someone in a graveyard, and the graveyard, they're out there wandering around, supposedly. So two officers in a marked car, they go out, and they are going to research this. They get out of the car, and the one guy, it's a female
that
officer.
one?
Yeah, female officer, gentleman, a big burly guy. He looks like, goes, "Well, I'm not afraid of a ghost." They get about 10 foot out of the car, and some woman has this blood-curdling scream. They both run for the car. They're back. You see the dash cam. They both run back inside. I'm thinking, yeah, that's how it really works. And then generally, if it's here in Annapolis, we get a call. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But, I got to admit, I mean, that can be a little creepy, and you just don't know. I mean, especially in a graveyard, you preset all your expectations, and then someone screams, "Oh my God!"
And
yeah.
not in the graveyard.
that was a
Yeah.
horrid scream, though.
Oh God,
Yeah,
yes,
that
it was.
was.
Yeah.
How do you
I
write that
remember
up in
watching
the
that.
paperwork?
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
explain
Yeah.
this?
If you want a career and you want to keep it, yeah,
You keep it out. You keep
You
it out.
attach a copy of the
Like the one
dash
pilot,
cam.
they asked, he said, "You saw a UFO and you didn't notice." He says, "I want to keep flying."
There you go.
That's
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, Santana is the guy who was relating that story about the retired officer.
Wow.
But when he was a docent, as a young teenager, still in high school, he was starting out working at the Whaley House. He had an encounter that involved something and involved a police officer response. So he's leaving and locking up for the night. He's the last one to leave. He's supposed to set the alarm.
Yep.
Okay. And then shut the door and leave. And as he's setting the alarm code, he hears a woman's voice say, "Why are you here?"
Yeah.
And it scared the bejesus out of him. I almost said a bad word, but anyway. It scared him to the point where he just ran out the front door. And of course, not setting the alarm, he then set off the alarm
Yeah.
because he didn't set the alarm. So that called the police officers. Police officers came and questioned him, what happened, and he told his story. And the officer goes, "Well, I need to get the story of the other lady." And
Sure.
the docent's like,
What other lady?
He goes, "The one in the green dress that was in there.
Wow.
And she works here, right? Because she's in period dress." And the docent's like, "No, we're alone."
Yeah.
And so they go in the house, check it out, and the house is empty. There's no one in there. But the officer had seen a lady in a green dress.
Kind of like my run-in with my only big paranormal story, I guess. I forgot about this one. I just commented earlier. Was the lady in the black dress out in Acton.
Yeah.
And one time we'll do that show. I started it several times, but I don't think we ever finished the script for it. And that's probably one of the biggest paranormal.
Yeah, we got to check because I remember.
Yeah.
So we'll have to look back and see if we
Maybe
did that
we done
one.
it. Maybe we done it. I don't
I think
remember
we did it
we
because I
did?
thought we had
may
10.
have.
Yeah.
We may have. It just, it was probably one of the first ones. The problem was somebody said, "Well, how did that affect you?" Well, first of all, we didn't know it was a ghost.
Ran out of time, right?
Yeah, we thought it was a person.
Right.
The time that bothers you is the time you realize
Realize
it's
it's
not a person.
right.
That's when it
Right.
gets you. So.
And so that docent,
Yeah.
Never forget that. And docents,
That'll stay with you. Yeah.
docents and housekeepers also have experiences. Now, my daughter was out there with some family friends. They took her on vacation with them, and they took her to the Whaley House.
Yeah.
Now, when they all got back, I knew. I said, "Oh, you went to Whaley? You know, did you have a good
Yeah.
time? Yeah, everything. Did anything happen? No." I was like, "Okay, great." A couple hours later, I get a call from her, a text from her uncle. Did Caitlin tell you what happened? I said, "Yeah, she said it was fun. Nothing happened." He goes, "No, ask her again."
Oh, wow.
So I said, "Caitlin, Uncle Mark says something happened when you were at the Whaley." She goes, "The cabinet opened on me." I said, "What?" So
Yeah.
from the courtroom into the front storeroom area, they were at the back end of the pack, and they're walking in, and they're stopped there at the doorway, and Mark feels Caitlin leaning into him, and so he moves over, thinking she needs more room. Well, she leans in again, and he's like, "What's going on?" And she goes, pointing over the other side, and he peers around, and the cabinet door is opening on its own towards Caitlin, and she's backing away.
Yeah.
So
Like,
much
get
so
away from me.
that Michelle is behind us, like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And then the tour guide at the front starts yelling at him, "Hush up back there. You got to listen, you know?" And Michelle's like, "No, the cabinet door's opening." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I know. That happens all the time."
It just does that.
It does that all the time. They always do that. And but she didn't.
Yeah.
I said, "What's happened?" Nothing happened. No, that's something.
You know, it's weird.
That's kids for you.
Yeah,
I know, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have the same impact, I guess. I mean, when I went, I thought it was
She was
neat,
over
but it
by
was
the
still
time she
early
got home.
enough.
It was not an apparition. No big
Yeah,
deal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, seen one, you seen them all. I mean, you know.
Yeah, it's just a cabinet.
Well, folks, that's all we have for this episode. Does anybody want to throw anything in before we get ready to do the ghost story of the day? It's a neat place. If you go to
How'd you
San
like it,
Diego,
Eric?
I tell you, they
I loved
usually, yeah. I mean,
How'd you like them legs?
yeah. Oh my God! I tell you what, this one
Favorite.
has a lot of information that I think most people don't know about the Whaley House. You know, they lop in Hotel Coronado, and I was stationed in Coronado for a while. Really loved hotel. I mean, I got to go through it. It's beautiful.
Oh,
it is
man.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they give tours, and I try to take what I could. I like to get out and go looking. I think everybody does when they get the opportunity. Whaley House is really neat. So was a lot of downtown, Old Town San Diego. Kind of reminds me of Old Town San Antonio. If you or Fort Worth, Old Town Fort Worth is another one, the Cattle Town area. You go down there, it kind of reminds me of that. So it was very neat. Yep. Well, folks, that's all we have for you tonight. It's now time for the ghost story of the day with Jennifer Verne.
Today's ghost story of the day is a little bit different. This is a personal story from my uncle. Uncle Al and Aunt Lucy listen religiously, so thank you guys very, very much for all your support. And this comes from him. Lake Sherwood is now an unincorporated community in the Santa Monica Mountains in Ventura County, California. In the early 1920s, the area around the lake was transformed into Sherwood Forest for the filming of Robin Hood, featuring Douglas Fairbanks, and that's where the name Lake Sherwood originated. A lot of information about this house is from my parents telling me when I was older. I still remember small moments of the incident. In 1954, my parents, sister, and I moved into a rental house in Lake Sherwood. It was a 2-story house that was next to a lake with a small fishing pier. I was only about 3 years old at the time, and my sister was 9 years old. We only lived there for 5 days. My sister told me that the moving boxes were never unpacked. My parents had owned a nursery in Encino, California on Ventura Boulevard, and my father drove there every day. Mom stayed home with me every day while my sister went to school. Mom told me she saw a lot of shadows in the house and knocking on the front door, and nobody was there. My parents also heard noises in the stairway every night. My parents told me that one night we had all gone out to dinner, and one of their friends came over to see us, and he knocked on the front door and no one answered, so he walked out by the pier to see if we were out there. When he started walking back, he saw moving shadows in the house, so he came back and knocked on the door again, but no one answered, and so he left. The last night we were there, it was in the middle of the night, and my parents woke me and my sister up to check on noises they heard on the staircase. I remember walking partway up the stairs with my father. My father told me he had heard noises in the upstairs room, and so as we're walking up the stairs, when we get there, we open the door, and at the top of the stairs, a dresser in the room fell over with items flying all around the room. He was freaked out and said that we were leaving at once. I still remember moving to a hotel in the middle of that night. My parents told me that the house had burned down after we moved out, but my sister said it was a few years later that the house had burned down. My parents told me that the owner did have problems renting the house because of noises, and that it made a good deal to rent because of that. They had also told me that a sea captain had previously died in the house. My dad was a skeptic about ghosts before this happened, but then he changed his mind. My mother always did believe in ghosts, and she was somewhat psychic.
Thanks for listening to Ghost. Again, I'm your host, Chief Lawson. You can find Ghost to Ghost on all major formats on the 15th and 30th of the month at midnight. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, maybe have a question or subject you'd like to ask about on air, or be used on the show, please email us at ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com, ghosttoghost@spiritindiana.com. I want to thank my production staff on Spirit, Jennifer Verne, our research manager and our producer, and Heather Lawson, our trainer on Spirit and our podcast director, for helping make these podcasts possible. My chief of staff, Andrew Brooks, for his guidance and help on the scripts, and everyone else involved. Thank you so much. See you next time. Until then, stay safe and remember the truth is out there. Good night. Ghost to Ghost podcast and its contents is the property of Spirit Paranormal Ltd. All rights reserved. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. You may not, except with written permission, use or distribute its contents for commercial use. Spirit Indiana Paranormal, covering the Hoosier State since 2002, Indy's oldest parapsychology investigation group. If you're experiencing what you believe to be paranormal issues, reach out to us for help at www.spiritindiana.com or call our hotline at 317-883-9103. Again, that is www.spiritindiana.com or our hotline at 317-883-9103. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself and the ones you love, and be safe out there.